The stifling summer air hung heavy in Amy's small studio apartment. The whirring of the old fan did little to cut through the heat. She sighed, pushing a stray strand of hair off her forehead, surveying the jumble of boxes and furniture scattered around the room. Today was moving day. After 15 years, she and Lily were leaving the house she'd shared with her ex-husband, leaving behind the man she had loved and cared for, only to be betrayed. 42, Amy had always considered herself a simple woman, housewife, devoted to her husband and his family. She had envisioned a life of quiet domesticity. That vision had shattered when she discovered her husband's infidelity. Pain was unbearable. She had clung to the remnants of their marriage, desperate to keep their family intact. All she received were cold words and indifference. After years of heartache and disappointment, Amy finally filed for divorce. She walked away with nothing but her beloved daughter. Just yesterday, her ex-husband brought that woman home. And then he had the audacity to throw Amy and Lily out. The memory of Lily's heartbroken cries for her father brought tears to Amy's eyes. She blinked them back, determined to stay strong for her daughter. This morning, after sending Lily off to school, she had returned to the apartment she had rented with the help of a friend. But hours later, she had barely made a dent in the mountain of belongings. Everything felt so heavy, especially Lily's old desk. Amy strained to push it across the floor, wondering where she would even put it. "Need any help in there?" A man's voice startled her. Amy looked up towards the window. A stranger, shirtless and smiling, was peering in. "Oh no, I'm fine, thank you though," Amy replied politely, a blush creeping up her neck. "Don't be shy, name's Blake. I own the building. Saw you wrestling with that desk. Figured you could use a hand. Besides, you shouldn't have to do all this heavy lifting by yourself," the man said, still smiling. Amy hesitated. The apartment door was slightly ajar. As much as she'd like to refuse, she really could use the help. Her gaze flickered to the man again. He was wearing only a pair of shorts, his bare chest on full display. Amy felt a prickle of unease. "Don't mind me," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "It's hot as hell out here, you know how it is? One shirt and I'm drenched in sweat. Figured I'd spare myself the misery." Amy didn't reply. Instead, she pushed the door open wider and stepped aside, allowing him to enter. "Would you mind just putting the desk against that wall over there?" he asked. "Say no more, ma'am. Leave it to me. You ladies and your delicate hands shouldn't have to deal with this kind of stuff." Effortlessly hoisted the desk and carried it to the designated spot. Before Amy could even thank him, he was already moving on to the next item on her to-do list. He assembled shelves, rearranged boxes, and even helped her unpack clothes. All the while, he chattered away. "Really, Blake, you don't have to do that," Amy protested. "You should be relaxing. You said you just got back." "It's nothing, ma'am. Just getting my workout in, you know? Besides," Blake said with a wink, "it would take you all day to finish this on your own." "But where is your husband? Shouldn't he be helping you with all this?" he asked, his voice laced with curiosity. We're recently divorced," Amy admitted quietly. She didn't know why she felt compelled to share that piece of information with a complete stranger. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to pry." "No, it's okay. Thank you again for your help. I don't know what I would have done without you." Amy grabbed a bottle of water from a box and offered it to him. "Don't mention it, ma'am. Think of it as my good deed for the day," Blake said, chugging the bottle of water Amy offered. Beads of sweat trickled down his temple, leaving a trail on the dusty floor. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, about to say goodbye when his eyes lingered on Amy. She was bent over a box, her back to him as she rearranged some items. Her old tank top, damp with sweat, clung to her skin, outlining her curves in a way that made Blake's breath hitch. "Damn, she's gorgeous," he thought, his gaze sweeping over her. He couldn't help but compare her to Jennifer. His wife was a good woman, no doubt, but she had let herself go over the years. The excitement of their early years had faded, leaving behind a comfortable, predictable routine. In the bedroom, Jennifer was, well, she was Jennifer. Uncomplicated, uninhibited. This woman, Amy, was different. There was a fire in her eyes, quiet strength that drew him in. Blake had never been one to shy away from a challenge, and he wanted her. Blake cleared his throat, trying to shake off the inappropriate thoughts. The truth was, Blake had been watching her for a while now. ever since he'd spotted her through the window. The way her skin peeked through the worn cotton of her shirt sent a jolt of desire straight to his gut. He knew the type of women who caught his eye, polished, put together. Amy was different. A little rough around the edges, maybe. That just made her more alluring. Blake swallowed hard, fighting the urge to lick his lips. She's like a breath of fresh air, he thought, already picturing her in his arms. He had always considered himself a confident man, and when it came to women, he rarely failed to get what he wanted. So, you got kids, Amy? He asked, hoping he didn't sound too eager. Me? Oh, I have a daughter, Lily. She's 10, Amy replied, still unpacking. Really? Same age as my Ethan. They go to the same school, you know? Maybe even the same grade. She gave a small nod but didn't elaborate. Blake wasn't sure if she was just being polite or if she was as aware of the attraction between them as he was. He decided to push his luck a little further. You know, for a mom, you look incredible. You've got a great figure, he blurted out, instantly regretting his choice of words as soon as they left his mouth. Smooth, Blake. Real smooth. Excuse me? Amy straightened up, confusion clouding her features. What I meant was... Blake stammered, trying to backpedal. It's just... Jennifer, my wife, well, she's let herself go a bit. You know how it is. Kids work no time for themselves. He trailed off, realizing how bad that sounded. He wasn't usually one to put down his wife, but something about Amy, her vulnerability, her beauty, made him lose his usual composure. Amy simply sighed, shaking her head slightly. Look, Blake, it's not easy for any woman to juggle everything. We all have our own struggles. You should be more supportive of your wife, not putting her down. Blake felt a pang of guilt. She was right, of course. He did love Jennifer in his own way, and he did provide for her and their son. But did money buy happiness? Or was he fooling himself into thinking that material possessions could fill the void he felt growing inside him? I guess you're right, he admitted quietly. It's just... Well, you're a breath of fresh air, Amy. Amy didn't reply. She picked up a framed photograph from the floor. A picture of her and Lily, both with wide, carefree smiles. She wondered if she'd ever feel that carefree again. Look, Blake, I appreciate the help. I really do. But I should get going. It's getting late, and I need to pick up Lily from school. How old is your daughter? She's 10, 5th grade, the elementary school down the street. No kidding, same as my Ethan. They probably have a few classes together. Small world, huh? Amy nodded, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. She hadn't liked the way Blake's eyes lingered on her earlier. His constant flirting was starting to make her uncomfortable. As discreetly as she could, Amy pulled a cardigan on, hoping to cover up a little. Well, I should really be going, she said again, edging towards the door. Right. Of course. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep you. Listen. Paused, running a hand through his hair. I'm actually going to be around for a week or so. Jennifer and Ethan are visiting her parents. If you need anything at all, just knock on my door, okay? Amy nodded, trying to ignore the way his eyes seemed to pierce right through her. Thanks again for everything, Blake. The moment the door closed behind him, Amy locked it, then double-checked to make sure the windows were secured. She didn't know why, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just invited trouble into her life. For the rest of the afternoon, Amy unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, trying to distract herself from the encounter with her landlord. Felt good to be in her own place, even if it was just a small studio. At least here, she didn't have to answer to anyone. No more trying to please a husband who didn't appreciate her. No more tiptoeing around a disapproving mother-in-law. Just her and Lily. Later that evening, after Lily was tucked into bed, Amy finally had a moment to herself. She went through her closet, looking for something to wear to her job interview the next day. It had been years since she'd had to dress up for anything other than a PTA meeting. Her fingers brushed against a silky dress she had bought on a whim a few years ago. It was a birthday gift to herself, a moment of indulgence during a time when she desperately needed to feel good about herself. She had never worn it. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she wondered if she even recognized the woman staring back at her. It had been a long time since she had dressed up for anything other than a PTA meeting. She took a deep breath and stepped out the door. Blake was leaning against the wall next to his apartment, smoking a cigarette. He saw her and grinned, his eyes sweeping over her. "Well, look who it is. Don't tell me I don't even recognize you all done up like that." Amy managed a small smile, trying not to acknowledge his blatant perusal. "Going somewhere special?" he asked, taking another drag of his cigarette. "Job interview," he said curtly. "Really? Well, good luck with that. I'm sure you'll wow 'em." He paused, then added, "You know, it's kind of weird you call me Blake. I mean, I know I'm a little younger than you, but—" Amy sighed. It was true. Blake was younger than her, by almost 10 years. Her marriage had been a late one, and she had struggled to conceive. Lily was their miracle baby, born just a year before Blake's son. "Sorry. Old habits die hard, I guess," she mumbled. "How about I call you Amy, and you call me Blake?" "No need for formalities." She nodded, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. It was just being friendly, she told herself. Still, she couldn't help but feel relieved when she finally reached the bus stop. Putting some distance between them, she could feel Blake's eyes on her as the bus pulled away. Her stomach churned with a mix of anxiety and something else. Something unsettling she couldn't quite place. Blake watched her go, his eyes lingering on the sway of her hips. He hadn't missed the way her dress hugged every curve, flash of her toned legs as she climbed onto the bus. "What you staring at?" Jennifer's sharp voice startled him. "What? Nothing. You know I hate it when you sneak up on me like that," he said, trying to sound annoyed. "Well, before you disappear on another one of your business trips, maybe you could help around here a little?" Jennifer snapped. "Remember you promised Ethan you'd take him to his swimming lesson today? You know how disappointed he'll be if you bail again." All right, I heard you." Blake headed inside, changing into a clean shirt before driving Ethan to his swimming lesson. As he sat by the pool, watching Ethan splash around with the other kids, Blake's mind kept replaying the encounter with Amy that morning. The way she had looked in that dress. He had seen her a few times since she had moved in a couple weeks ago, mostly brief encounters in the hallway or by the mailbox. But today had been different. Seeing her all dressed up, her confidence, it had sparked something in him. And the fact that she was off limits, that she was his tenant, it just made her more desirable. He had always been a man who went after what he wanted. And right now, he wanted Amy. He knew it was a dangerous game he was playing, flirting with her like that. But he couldn't seem to help himself. He told himself it was harmless, just a bit of fun. Jennifer would never have to know. But as the days passed, and his departure for his next trucking route drew closer, Blake found himself becoming increasingly impatient. He had a limited window of opportunity before he'd be gone for 6 weeks. By then, who knew if Amy would even still be living here? "Hey, Amy, how'd the interview go?" Blake asked 2 days later. He had just dropped Ethan off at home and spotted Amy getting off the bus. "I got the job. Starts next week." Amy's smile was radiant. "That's great. I'm happy for you. Where's Lily? Haven't seen her around lately." "My parents are in town, so they took her to visit some friends. She'll be back in a couple of days." "So you're all alone tonight?" Blake asked, trying to keep his tone casual. He could tell she felt a little awkward by the question. "Yeah, just me. Why?" "Oh, no reason. Just Jennifer's out of town with Ethan, visiting her folks. Figured if you were bored, you could always come over. We could order pizza, watch a movie. Just, neighborly stuff." He instantly regretted his words. Sounded desperate, pathetic even. "Thanks for the offer, Blake, but I'm pretty tired. Think I'm just going to order some takeout and relax tonight." She fumbled with her keys, eager to end the conversation. Right. Horse. Well, if you change your mind, have a good night, Blake." She hurried inside, locking the door behind her. Blake watched her go, a slow smile spreading across his face. He had a feeling this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Something was different about lunch that day. Ethan was the first to notice. "Dad, you seem happy. What's going on?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Blake set down his fork, a slow grin spreading across his face. He looked at Jennifer and Ethan, his tone uncharacteristically cheerful. "How about a surprise? You guys want to go visit Grandma and Grandpa this afternoon? I'm taking the truck out tomorrow, so I figured it's the perfect time for a visit." Ethan jumped up and down in excitement. "Really, Dad? Are you serious? We haven't been to Grandma's in forever." Jennifer, however, seemed less enthusiastic. Blake, what's gotten into you? You know we just went to visit them last month, and you never want to go. Come on, Jen. Don't be like that. Been a while. I'm sure your mom misses her grandson. Besides, he added, his voice softening, haven't had much time with you two lately. Figured we could use a little family getaway. My treat. He flashed her a smile that was pure charm, hoping to distract her from his unusual eagerness to get out of town. In truth, Blake had other plans. Plans that didn't involve spending the weekend with his in-laws. He had been itching for another chance to catch Amy alone. And now, with Jennifer and Ethan out of the picture, he'd finally have his chance. Jennifer, though initially hesitant, eventually warmed to the idea. Her parents lived a good hour's drive away, and she hadn't seen them since her father's birthday last month. She had gotten used to Blake's sporadic displays of affection over the years. He had a demanding job, always on the road. She tried not to take it personally when he seemed distant or preoccupied. As soon as lunch was over, Blake insisted they pack their bags. He even offered to load the car, something he hadn't done in recent memory. You guys relax. I got this, he said, practically shoving Jennifer and Ethan out the door. As they were leaving, Blake glanced over at Amy's apartment. The door was closed, but he could see a light on inside. He quickly averted his gaze when Jennifer turned around, a knowing smile on her face. You okay there, Blake? You seem a little flushed. Yeah, just the heat. Come on, let's go before we hit traffic. He practically pushed her into the car, his mind already racing ahead to the night that awaited him. The drive to Jennifer's parents felt longer than usual. Blake tried to focus on the road, on Ethan's excited chatter from the back seat, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Amy. By now, Jennifer and Ethan would be settled in at her parents'. He pictured them gathered around the table, laughing and sharing stories. A pang of guilt hit him, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of anticipation. He pulled up to his in-laws' house, his stomach churning with a mix of guilt and excitement. Ethan rushed out of the car to greet his grandparent, while Jennifer lingered by the car, a worried frown on her face. She had noticed her husband's unusual eagerness to leave, the way he couldn't seem to sit still throughout the entire drive. By the time he pulled up to his apartment building, it was almost 9 o'clock. He hadn't lied about having something to take care of, but it wasn't exactly the kind of business he wanted Jennifer to know about. He parked his truck a block away and headed to the bar down the street. He needed a drink. 3. He wasn't a heavy drinker, not usually. Tonight, he needed something to calm his nerves, something to loosen him up. After a few beers, he felt a surge of confidence. He could do this. He'd gotten himself into this mess, and he'd be damned if he was going to let some misplaced guilt stop him from getting what he wanted. He tossed back the rest of his drink, paid the tab, and stumbled out into the night. As he approached his building, he spotted a light on in Amy's apartment. She was still up. His heart quickened. He took a deep breath, composing himself. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys, pretending to search for them, making a show of his supposed drunkenness. Damn it, he muttered, kicking at a loose stone on the walkway. He glanced at Amy's window again. She was close enough to hear him if he made enough noise. He continued to fumble with his keys, letting out a string of increasingly frustrated curses. Finally, he heard the sound of a window sliding open. Blake, what's going on out there? Are you all right? Amy's voice was a mix of concern and annoyance. Plastered on a sheepish grin, relieved his little act had worked. Hey, Amy, didn't see you there. Think I've had a few too many. Can't seem to find my damn keys. He patted his pockets for emphasis, then slumped against the wall, feigning exhaustion. Not again. You know, you really should get a designated driver next time. She sounded exasperated. I know, you're right. Maybe you can help me find them? I think I dropped them somewhere around here. Have you tried calling Jennifer? It's not that late, maybe she's still up. Yeah, about that. Blake let out a dramatic sigh, dropping onto the stoop, his shoulders slumping in defeat. We had a little fight before I left, so she took Ethan and went to stay with her parents for a few days. And my phone's dead. Course. Pulled out his phone, showing her the blank screen. It had been off all evening, another calculated move on his part. Amy hesitated, her gaze shifting from Blake's face to the phone in his hand. He could tell she was torn between helping him and wanting to distance herself from the situation. Blake could tell Amy was hesitant to let him use her phone. She disappeared inside for a moment, then returned with her cell phone in hand. "Here," he said, holding it out to him. "Jennifer might answer for me. She's not very trusting when it comes to other women." Blake made a show of searching for his keys one last time before taking the phone from her with a defeated sigh. He knew Jennifer would never answer a call from a stranger, especially this late at night. But he wasn't going to tell Amy that. "You sure you don't mind?" he asked, making his voice as pitiful as possible. "It's fine, really. You can't exactly sleep out here all night. You'll catch a cold." Amy looked around, as if searching for a solution. "How about you try the bench over there? I can grab you a blanket." She pointed towards a wrought iron bench in the small courtyard, the only piece of furniture besides a couple of scraggly potted plants. "No, I can't." He started to protest. Amy cut him off. "Look, Blake, it's either the bench or you walk to the nearest motel. And frankly, you don't look like you can walk a straight line right now." "I'm really sorry to ask this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But would it be completely out of line to ask if, maybe?" He trailed off, letting the question hang in the air between them. "Ask what?" Amy's voice was barely audible. "Could I crash on your couch, just for a few hours? I'll be out of your hair first thing in the morning, I promise. I know it's a huge imposition, and I would never ask, but—" He didn't give her a chance to answer. Before she could protest, he lurched to his feet and stumbled towards her open door, feigning a drunken stagger. "Just for a few hours. It won't be any trouble, I swear." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him before she could object. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but tidy. He recognized some of the boxes from the day he had helped her move in. Air was thick with the scent of jasmine, a stark contrast to the bland air freshener Jennifer favored. The sight of her bed, a simple double with a faded quilt thrown across it, sent a jolt of desire through him. This used to be his apartment, the apartment he had shared with Jennifer when they were first married. This was where Ethan had taken his first steps, where they had spent countless nights tangled in each other's arms, their laughter echoing through the tiny space. The memory was both intoxicating and painful. I shouldn't have come in. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking straight." He swayed slightly, propping himself up against the wall. "Just go, Blake." Amy's voice was tight with frustration. "Go sleep it off, and we can pretend this never happened." He ignored her, letting out a groan as he sank onto the small sofa, burying his face in a throw pillow. "I'm so tired," he mumbled. "Just for an hour, I promise." He closed his eyes, feigning sleep. He could hear Amy moving around, her footsteps hesitant, as she moved towards her bedroom. He waited a few minutes, letting the silence stretch, then opened his eyes a sliver, just enough to see her silhouette framed in the doorway. She stood there for a moment, her shoulders slumped with defeat. Then, with a sigh, she turned and disappeared into her bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The night was still young. Blake lay on the couch, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear Amy's soft breaths from the next room. He waited, listening to the tick-tock of the clock on the wall, each tick a painful reminder of the dwindling minutes before the sky began to lighten and his window of opportunity closed forever. Blake lay still, listening to the sound of Amy's breathing. The minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. Finally, he heard the soft, even rhythm that signaled she was asleep. He rose from the couch, heart pounding in his chest, and tiptoed towards her bedroom. He had gotten away with so much already tonight. Jennifer was miles away, oblivious, could walk away now, pretend this had all been a drunken mistake. But the pull of desire, chance to finally have Amy in his arms, was too strong to resist. He slipped into the room, careful not to make a sound. The faint glow of the streetlight filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the bed. He could see Amy lying on her side, her hair spilling across the pillow. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her bare arm. She stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and he froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Blake?" she mumbled, voice thick with sleep. He didn't answer, instead leaning down, his lips brushing against her neck. She smelled like jasmine, a sweet, intoxicating scent that made his head spin. He moved his hand to her shoulder, gently pulling her towards him. Amy's eyes flew open. "Blake, what are you doing?" she gasped, pushing him away. She tried to scramble away from him, but he was too strong. He grabbed her wrists, pinning them above her head. "Let go of me," she yelled, her voice laced with panic. "Get out! Are you crazy?" Blake ignored her protests, his lips crashing down on hers. She struggled against him, but his kiss was relentless, demanding. She tasted like fear and something else, something that ignited a fire deep within him. "I want you, Amy. I need you," growled against her lips, his voice husky with desire. "Are you insane? Let go of me," she screamed, her words muffled by his kisses. "You have a wife. This is wrong." She fought against him, kicking and screaming, but her resistance only seemed to fuel his desire. He ripped at her clothes, hands roaming over her body, ignoring her plea. "Don't you get it? I'm divorced. This doesn't concern you. Let me go." He paused, momentarily stunned by her revelation. You're divorced." "Yes, but you're not. You have a wife and a child. How could you do this?" She glared at him, her eyes filled with disgust. "Get out, now." Blake hesitated. Part of him, the small, decent part, that was still clinging to some semblance of morality, wanted to heed her words, to get up and leave before things went any further. But the rest of him, part that had been consumed by lust and fueled by alcohol, was determined to have her. "Just shut up, Amy," he growled, his voice rough with impatience. "Just be quiet." As Blake continued his assault, she felt a wave of self-loathing wash over her. How could she let this happen? She had sworn after her divorce that she would never let a man take advantage of her again. Yet here she was, letting this monster violate her in her own home. But as the night wore on and Blake continued his relentless pursuit, something shifted within her. The initial shock and disgust gave way to a strange numbness. And then, to her horror, she started to feel something else. Flicker of heat. A surge of desire. It was as if her body had betrayed her, responding to his touch despite her mind's desperate pleas. Shame washed over her as she realized she was no longer fighting him. She had given in, succumbed to the overwhelming force of his desire. She wanted to scream, to tell him to stop, but the words caught in her throat. She was trapped, not just by his physical strength, but by her own body's treacherous response. The sound of their bodies colliding, the rhythmic creaking of the bed frame, filled the small room. Each thrust from Blake, each gasp that escaped her lips was a testament to her own weakness, her own complicity in this act of violation. As the first rays of dawn crept through the blinds, Blake finally collapsed beside her, his chest heaving, his body slick with sweat. She lay there, numb and exhausted, feeling like a stranger in her own skin. She had become the very thing she had despised, the other woman, the homewrecker. As for Blake, he had always been a man who got what he wanted, and when it came to women, he'd never had much trouble getting them into bed. He wasn't particularly proud of his track record, but he wasn't exactly ashamed of it either. So while he was pleased that his plan had worked, he wasn't surprised. What did surprise him was Amy's question the next morning. "Aren't you worried your wife will find out?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Nah, she'll never know. Besides, she's at her parents' for a few days. And I kinda like the thrill of it, you know? Makes things more exciting." He grinned at her, but she just stared back at him, her eyes cold. "You know this was a mistake, right?" she said, pushing his hand away from her stomach. "Just go, before someone sees you. Come on, Amy, don't be like that. We had fun, didn't we? We can do it again, no strings attached." "I said no, Blake. This can't happen again. I don't want any part of this. It's wrong." She got out of bed and walked over to the vanity, avoiding his gaze. "Just go, and try to be a better husband to Jennifer. Women aren't as strong as you think." Blake bristled at her words. "Come on, Amy, don't act like you're some innocent victim here. You weren't exactly fighting me off last night." The word victim hung in the air between them. Amy stopped, her reflection staring back at her from the mirror. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had been a victim, just like all the other women Blake had seduced and discarded. Just like she had been a victim in her own marriage. "Just get out, Blake," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "before I really start to regret this." He reached for his phone, remembering he had turned it off before heading to Jennifer's parents' place. He wasn't ready to face the consequences of his actions just yet. He'd deal with Jennifer later. Right now, he needed to get out of here before Amy saw right through his flimsy facade. Right. I should get going anyway. But hey. He grinned at her, leaning in as if to kiss her, but she turned her face away. We should do this again sometime. I had a blast. He didn't wait for a response. He slipped out the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He had gotten what he wanted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake. Amy didn't bother listening to the rest of his empty promises. She just wanted him gone. She stood there, frozen in place, until she heard the front door slam shut. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to shake the feeling of violation, the shame of her own complicity. She had vowed, after her divorce, to never again be the other woman, the one who broke up a marriage. And yet, she had done exactly that. She had become the very thing she had hated. The sound of Blake's truck pulling out of the driveway that afternoon was a bittersweet relief. She knew she would never see him again, and she was determined to forget that this night had ever happened. Some things are impossible to forget. 2 days later, Amy ran into Jennifer as she was walking Lily to school. Jennifer was sweeping the front steps of her townhouse, brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up and smiled when she saw them. "Morning, Amy. Taking Lily to school?" she asked brightly. "Morning, Jennifer. Gotta get her there before work." "You taking the bus?" "Yeah, it's just a few stops." "Say, why don't you wait here for a few minutes? Blake's taking Ethan to school in a bit. He can drop Lily off on his way. Right on his route." "Oh, that's okay. We're fine. It's really not that far." Amy declined, her voice tight. She couldn't bear the thought of being in the same car as Blake, let alone accepting a favor from his wife. Amy quickly steered Lily towards the bus stop, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Jennifer's eyes on her as they walked away. "Bye, Amy. See you later," Jennifer called after them, her voice cheerful. Amy didn't turn around, just kept walking, her hand gripping Lily's tightly. As they reached the corner, she heard Blake's voice behind them. "All right, Ethan, I'm heading out. Be good for Grandma and Grandpa, okay? I'll be back to pick you up in a couple of months." "But Blake, you just got back. You promised you'd have dinner with us before you left again." Jennifer's voice was laced with disappointment. "I know, honey, but I gotta get on the road. Big delivery, tight deadline. You know how it is." "Work, huh? Or is it another one of your little side trips?" Jennifer's voice was sharp, accusing. Amy quickened her pace, her cheeks burning with shame. She hurried Lily onto the bus, eager to escape the scene. She could feel Blake's eyes on her back as the bus pulled away. As the weeks passed, Amy tried to put the encounter with Blake behind her. She focused on her new job, on being a good mother to Lily. She saw Jennifer occasionally, at the mailbox or in the laundry room. They exchanged polite smiles, brief snippets of conversation about the weather or their children. Jennifer seemed oblivious to what had happened between Amy and her husband. Sometimes she would complain about Blake's long hours, his frequent absences. Amy would listen, nodding sympathetically, heart twisting with guilt. "He's a good man, you know? Just a little restless. Always chasing something," Jennifer said one day, her voice filled with a weary affection. "How do you do it, Amy? How do you keep a man like that interested?" Amy didn't know how to answer. How could she explain that the only way she had managed to keep Blake interested was by betraying Jennifer's trust, by giving in to his base desires? "I wouldn't know. My ex, he wasn't the faithful type," she said finally, her voice strained. She wanted to tell Jennifer the truth, confess her sin, but the words caught in her throat. She was too ashamed, too afraid of the consequence. Besides, what good would it do? It would only hurt Jennifer, destroy her marriage. And so, Amy continued to play the role of the supportive friend, confidant, all the while harboring a secret, threatened to consume her. She had thought that she could outrun her guilt, that time would heal the wounds she had inflicted on herself and on Jennifer. She was wrong. It was a Sunday afternoon. Amy had the day off, and Lily was at her after-school writing club. She had promised her daughter a special dinner to celebrate winning first place in the school writing competition. Jennifer had called earlier, asking Amy to pick up Ethan from soccer practice. As she had a late meeting at work, Amy had reluctantly agreed, still feeling uncomfortable around her friend after that night with Blake. Amy glanced at the clock. She had a couple of hours before she had to leave. She decided to treat herself to a long, hot shower. The spray of water felt soothing against her skin, washing away the tension that had been building up all week. Closed her eyes, humming a tune as the steam filled the small bathroom. She had gotten into the habit of leaving the bathroom door unlocked while showering. It was a stupid oversight, she knew that. But after her divorce, it had felt good to finally have some privacy, to not have to worry about someone barging in on her. She hadn't heard Blake's truck pull into the driveway. He was supposed to be on the road for another week. At least, that's what Jennifer had told her. He hadn't bothered to tell his wife he was coming home early. He wanted to surprise her, pulled himself. He hadn't planned on seeing Amy. Not really. But as he walked past her apartment, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He could hear the sound of the shower running, a familiar tune being hummed off-key. He hesitated for a moment, heart pounding in his chest. He knew he should keep walking, go inside and surprise Jennifer with his early arrival. His feet had a mind of their own. He pushed the door open, his gaze drawn to the thin curtain that separated the bathroom from the rest of the apartment. He could see the outline of her body through the translucent fabric, the water cascading over her skin. He stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. The sound of the running water, Amy's soft humming, filled the small space, stirring a familiar ache within him. He couldn't help himself. He reached out and turned off the shower. "Blake, what are you? Get out!" Amy screamed, fumbling for a towel as she realized he was standing there, watching her. But it was too late. Blake was already upon her, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. "God, Amy, I've missed you. Couldn't stay away any longer," he whispered, his voice husky with desire. "What are you doing? Jennifer will be home any minute. Please, just go," she pleaded, trying to push him away, but her words were lost in the heat of his kiss. "She's not coming. She's gone to pick up Ethan." His hands roamed over her wet skin, touch sending shivers down her spine. "Don't fight it, Amy. You know you want this." Amy tried to resist, but his touch was intoxicating. Her body, still tingling from the hot shower, betrayed her, responding to him in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her legs felt weak, her breath catching in her throat as his kisses grew more urgent. The last vestiges of her resistance crumbled as he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed. They fell onto the mattress, their bodies entangled, a tangled mess of limbs and desperate kisses. Neither of them heard the front door open. Neither of them saw the look of utter devastation on Jennifer's face as she stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching her husband and her friend, naked and entwined on the bed. "What? What is going on here?" Jennifer's voice was a barely audible whisper. The sound of her voice shattered the spell. Amy pushed Blake away, scrambling for the sheets to cover herself, face burning with shame. Blake sat up, his eyes wide with panic, fumbling for his clothes. "Jennifer, I can explain." But Jennifer wasn't listening. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on Amy, her eyes filled with a mixture of betrayal and disgust. "Get out," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Both of you. Get out of my house." Amy scrambled out of bed, her nakedness exposed, her shame overwhelming. She couldn't meet Jennifer's eyes. She felt sick to her stomach, her heart pounding in her chest. "I am so sorry, Jennifer. I didn't mean," she stammered, the words catching in her throat. "Don't you dare apologize to me. You're disgusting." Jennifer spat, her voice trembling with rage. "I thought you were my friend. How could you do this to me?" Amy stumbled back, her hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. She wanted to explain, to tell Jennifer that it wasn't her fault. Blake had seduced her. The words wouldn't come. What was there to say? She had betrayed her friend, broken her trust in the worst possible way. Blake, fully dressed now, stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Jen, let's just go home and talk about this. Please." He reached for her hand, but she recoiled as if he had burned her. "Don't touch me. I never want to see either of you again." Jennifer turned and fled, her sobs echoing in the small apartment. Amy stood there, trembling, the weight of her betrayal crushing her. She had destroyed everything. Her friendship with Jennifer. Her own sense of self-worth. Blake, seeing that Jennifer was gone, turned back to Amy. "Look, it's not a big deal. She'll get over it." Amy's gaze was cold, full of loathing. "Get out," she whispered. and don't ever come back. Amy knew in that moment that she had to leave. She couldn't stay here in this town where every corner held a memory of her betrayal. She packed a few bags, took Lily, and left without a word. She moved back to her hometown, a small, quiet town on the Oregon coast, where she could try to rebuild her life, piece by shattered piece. She took a job at a local bookstore, focusing all her energy on raising Lily and trying to atone for her sins. She never saw Blake or Jennifer again. But the memory of their betrayal, the look of heartbreak in Jennifer's eyes, haunted her for years to come. She had learned a painful lesson that day, a lesson about the destructive power of desire, the fragility of trust, and the enduring weight of guilt. She had found a kind of peace in her quiet life by the sea, but she knew that she would never truly forgive herself for what she had done. The scars of that betrayal would remain with her forever, a constant reminder of the day she had destroyed her friend's life and her own.